Late December 1980, Vince Thurkettle was on one of his serene mornings at work in Rendlesham Forest, a morning like any other with plenty of wood to cut. Nothing out of the ordinary. But suddenly, in the distance, Vince notices a car approaching very slowly towards him. The car stops abruptly. Dressed in suits, two men about 30 years old get out of the car. What were these men doing out here in the middle of nowhere? Are they journalists interviewing the locals and workers? Vince asked himself. The voice of one of the men is heard. "Good morning. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" From this moment on, Vince Thurkettle's life would change forever, turning his days into days full of enigmas, doubts, and mysteries. The unidentified visitors asked him if he had been out the night before. Vince had said no. Without a second's hesitation, they relentlessly asked him dozens more questions, including, "Did you leave your house? Did you see or hear anything strange?" Dumbfounded, Vince was left only to answer in the negative to each of the questions, and that was when these mysterious men gave him more information about it. "There was a report of some red lights in the woods. We're just checking." Believing them to be reporters, Vince unhesitatingly ran out every day afterwards to buy the paper and find out what had happened. Of course, there was never anything. Thurkettle, now 66, was a young forestry worker at the time of the unexplained incidents. These events took place on December 26 and 28 in 1980, when U.S. Air Force security personnel stationed at nearby Raf Woodbridge had reported seeing and witnessing strange lights around the forest. 4 decades later, we're still trying to understand what happened. Mankind has always looked to the skies for meaning, but as our yearning for knowledge has reached farther into the depths of space, the search becomes for the answer to the question, are we alone? If you seek the truth, like, subscribe, click the bell icon, join us. This is what the world needs. This is disclosure. The Rendelsham Forest incident is probably the best documented UFO incident worldwide and second only to Roswell in terms of popularity. The truth is that it has undoubtedly formed part of one of the most authoritative pieces of evidence for scientists, enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists. And yes, it is very easy to understand the reason. Imagine the following situation. A member of the defense organization in charge of the protection of your country doesn't talk about a confusing sighting of flashing lights, but about a UFO that landed. A police commander in your country speaks of a scene where something seemed to float in and out of the trees. And finally, a U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel refers to what happened through an audio tape recorded at the scene. "Okay, we're watching the thing. We're probably about 200 or 300 yards away. It looks like it's winking at you, and the flash is so bright it almost burns your eye." Each of these statements came to public light in the wake of what happened in 1980 at the Woodbridge and Bentwaters military bases in the United Kingdom, operated by the U.S. Air Force as part of the country's broader military presence in Europe. And yes, as you might guess, each of these mysterious occurrences were documented, experienced, and recounted by people highly trained visually in identifying potential threats. On this occasion, they were observing something they had never experienced before, something that many insist is beyond our world. 42 years ago, a large remote forest in Suffolk was the scene of one of the most amazing and incredible sightings in documented history. With land stretching nearly 4,000 acres, this extraordinary forest is part of an incredible natural beauty, which boasts a variety of places for families to have fun, from picnics to sculpture and playgrounds for children. However, behind all this wonder that exists today, there is a truth that is impossible to hide. The mysteries that have existed in the depths of this great forest since 1980. Before, this vast territory was much larger than it is today, but much of the forest was cleared for the construction of RAF Woodbridge, a former Air Force base that was completed in 1943. It was used as a vital airfield during World War II. Damaged aircraft from their missions in Germany landed here. However, in the Cold War, the forest was used by the United States Air Force, which based several of its fighter squadrons there. This is when something rather strange happened just outside the airbase, known today as the Rendlesham Forest sighting. In late December 1980, various members of the U.S. Air Force claimed to have seen and witnessed the existence of a UFO, which was reported in a memo to the Ministry of Defense Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt, Deputy Base Commander. According to the report, at about 3 a.m. on Boxing Day, a security patrol near the east gate of the airbase, while on routine patrols, observed lights descending gently in the woods. At first, everyone thought it was just an aircraft descending. However, to everyone's surprise, Further investigation would prove otherwise. According to the investigations, it was an object described in the note as shiny and metallic-looking with colored lights. Apparently, the object began to move through the forest as the animals on the local farms went wild with frenzy, something that normally never happened because they were used to the sounds of aircraft. On this occasion, something different was happening. When the police arrived shortly after 4 a.m., they reported that the only light visible was that of the Orford Ness Lighthouse. If anything had been in the woods, it had either been hidden or had already disappeared. According to reports, the police and military went to explore the forest later in the day to find answers to what had happened. Stunned, they found 3 impressions on the ground that formed a triangle. They also saw burn marks and broken branches in the nearby foliage. Everyone looked again and again at the impressions, the burns, and the broken branches, but the final verdict was that it was probably the animals. But what kind of animals would be capable of leaving such strong marks in the forest? None, or at least none that exist on the face of our Earth. Not to be discouraged and to find out for sure what had happened, Lieutenant Colonel Halt and several other Air Force men made another trip to the scene on December 28th to take radiation readings. They apparently detected a small explosion some distance away. However, flashing lights were also observed to the east of the forest on the other side of the field. According to Halt, 3 lights were seen in the sky, the brightest of which hovered for up to 3 hours and occasionally sent beams of light to the ground. Astronomers within the investigation suggest that these lights may have been very bright stars, while the Orford Ness Lighthouse was also to the east of the field. Could it have been the lighthouse that played a trick on them? Will there be, after what happened, any definitive explanation? The sighting in Rendlesham Forest undoubtedly aroused infinite curiosity among scientists and amateurs, becoming, far from being nonsense, the most important and famous sighting in the United Kingdom. After the strange sightings, the Ministry of Defense did not bother to investigate the mysterious incident as it did not pose a threat to national security. In addition, there are many who do not trust the trained pilots and claim that what they may have seen could have been a bright star or the light from the Orford Ness Lighthouse. However, the most important part of what happened has been tirelessly studied: Halt's memo and the sound recordings that were documented that night.
What looks like a blasted or scrubbed up area here. We get very positive readings. See, is that?
These are now public under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act of 1983. The reports range from the memo to the recording of Halt's voice while they were searching for traces of some kind of radiation. In a 2010 affidavit, Colonel Halt stated that he did indeed believe the event was extraterrestrial. He also stated that it had been covered up by the UK and US governments. The Suffolk Police log did not conclude the same. The force said the Orford Ness Lighthouse was responsible for the only lights visible on the first night. Such mysteries have since been in a seesaw of opinion, and although much of what happened has been covered up from public opinion, there is much evidence to indicate that what happened was not at all human. Many times we are probably far from the answers because we simply find ourselves asking the wrong questions. After the sightings, the really important part of the investigation was not to find out if it really posed a danger, but to really seek the answer to what had happened that night in Rendlesham Forest. Who were the visitors really? What did they come looking for in this forest? And maybe above all, who were Mr. Thurkettle's mysterious visitors? Were they the so-called men in black who are in charge of investigating and covering up incidents like these? This mystery has continued through reports and investigations that place it as one of the most incredible events in the UFO world because of the documentation and eyewitness credibility. Perhaps the true mystery is whether or not the truth will be revealed. If you want to be notified when this happens, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.